Okay, so when you think of the presidents who really shaped modern America, who pops into your head? Roosevelt, right? Lincoln, maybe? But what if I told you one of the most pivotal presidents of the last 150 years is someone most of us have, well, completely forgotten?
And this number? This is a huge reason why. $1 billion. This represents the very first billion-dollar Congress in American history. I mean, a mind-boggling sum for the time that sparked massive controversy and really came to define his presidency.
So, who was the president behind this massive budget? And more importantly, why have so many of us basically forgotten him? That's the question we're digging into today. We're uncovering the story of a one-term president whose impact, believe it or not, far outlasted his time in office.
To really get a handle on his presidency, we have to start with the man himself and his very unusual path to power. So this is Benjamin Harrison. And he wasn't exactly an outsider, you know? He came from a political dynasty. His grandfather was actually President William Henry Harrison. He was a Civil War veteran, a U.S. Senator, and a huge supporter of military veterans. He definitely had the resume, but his path to the White House was anything but standard.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Like only a handful of others in all of U.S. history, Harrison lost the popular vote but won the presidency thanks to the Electoral College. That means he walked into office without a clear mandate from the people, right as the country was facing these massive industrial changes and a ton of inequality.
Okay, and this is where the story gets really fascinating. Despite his super narrow victory, Harrison's administration got right to work on an agenda that was incredibly forward-thinking, literally laying the groundwork for the 20th century.
His most significant achievement? Taking on the most powerful economic forces of the Gilded Age, the giant corporate monopolies, better known back then as trusts.
So what exactly were these trusts? Well, basically, they were massive corporations that dominated an entire industry. Steel, oil, you name it. They could set any price they wanted, crush any competitor, and until Harrison, the government had never really stepped in to regulate them.
In 1890, Harrison signed the Sherman Antitrust Act into law. Now, was it strongly enforced right away? Not really, but you cannot overstate how important this was. It was the first tool the federal government ever had to challenge monopolies. It created the legal foundation that presidents like Teddy Roosevelt would later use to famously bust the trusts.
But Harrison's vision for a modern America didn't stop with the economy. It also reshaped the actual map of the country. This number, 6, that's how many new states were admitted to the Union during his presidency, more than under any other president. We're talking North and South Dakota, Montana, Washington, Idaho, and Wyoming, all joining the nation.
And the list just goes on. He oversaw a massive transformation of the U.S. Navy, moving from old wooden sailing ships to modern steel battleships, which really prepared America for a global role. He set aside the first national forest reserves, the very beginning of federal conservation. He even supported a federal bill to protect the voting rights of African Americans, though it was ultimately defeated by his opponents in Congress.
Now, with a record like that, you'd expect him to be a popular hero, right? But that's not what happened. In fact, some of his key policies sparked a massive public backlash that would ultimately come to define his presidency.
The biggest source of that anger was something called the McKinley Tariff of 1890. This law jacked up taxes on imported goods to protect American industries, but the rates were incredibly high, some of the highest in the nation's history, and the effect on everyday people was immediate.
This policy pretty much split the country in two. On one side, you had the big American industrialists who were now shielded from foreign competition. They loved it. On the other side, well, you had pretty much everyone else, consumers, farmers, small business owners, who suddenly saw prices for everyday goods just skyrocket.
And the political fallout was immediate. Just look at this chart from the 1890 midterm elections. The Democrats won a commanding majority in the House of Representatives. It was a clear sign that voters were punishing Harrison's party for the high prices. The public had spoken, and they were not happy.
You know, on top of all the unpopular policies, Harrison's own personality was a real problem. He was known to be intelligent and principled, sure, but he came across as cold and formal. In an age of rising populism, he just couldn't connect with the average voter, which made it impossible to build support for his tough policies.
So, how should we remember him? When you weigh the long-term impact against the short-term political firestorm, a much more complex picture of his presidency starts to emerge.
On the plus side, his achievements were truly foundational. The Sherman Antitrust Act became a vital tool for economic fairness. The modern Navy he built prepared America to become a world power. The 6 new states helped develop the West, and his conservation efforts started the national forest system we know today. Those are some heavy hitters.
But the immediate negatives were just as real. That billion-dollar Congress created a powerful public image of wasteful spending. The high tariffs hurt regular people and cost him politically. His silver policy, meant to help farmers, ended up contributing to a massive economic crash right after he left office. And yeah, his distant personality pretty much sealed his fate as a one-term president.
In the end, this quote really sums it all up. His presidency was a crucial, if kind of bumpy, turning point. He wasn't always popular, and his policies caused real pain for many, but he pushed the nation through a huge transition, setting the stage for the modern America of the 20th century.
Which leaves us with this final question. He was a single-term president, largely defined by his failures in the moment. But when you look at the groundwork he laid for everything that came after, from trust-busting to conservation, was Benjamin Harrison actually far more successful than we give him credit for? It's a legacy definitely worth reconsidering.